Oh, sorry.
Memory of Christmas.
Yes. Well, I never remembered. I had it on my phone. But you know, no possibility of mine remembering it at all.
I looked at their timetable,
Well, I'm just trying to slide it in a bit closer in to try to get people, partly because they're just coming in on teaching the online version, coming in on Hangout on air, so we're going to have people slightly tighter in today. It's not essential that you see people on camera, but it's just so that you can see my introduction and so we can start at least from the same point. These tables are a bit weird. Hopefully, we have enough. This one here. So, how was Christmas?
Wonderful. Trying to do assignments while tends to speak to children. Talk to loads of just affection.
Oh, yeah, I had one of those.
They're everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have a chest infection, I had a chest infection.
Oh, yeah.
Well, in this case, it was the pressure, so she's old enough
Yeah.
to pass that.
Did you ever have a shot? Didn't have them out?
No, not yet.
They don't do them anymore unless they really
They're thinking they might
Yeah.
take what else. We don't need to write more stories, so we don't really.
How was your Christmas?
Very quiet. I didn't do very much. At all. I wonder. I'll just try something here to improve. Nope, not that one. That's a bit better, isn't it? Veronese looks a little better like that.
There's the dark. I need to sit me off. How was your Christmas?
It was nice, relaxing.
You didn't get flooded?
Actually, we were traveling up and down to Washburn, so there was a bit of, the lovely divergence.
Yes.
Like coming into contact with like huge articulated lorries coming the off Blair route.
Yeah.
And that was the middle of the night.
Very
Some of
good.
the flooding was really bad. I was really lucky, there was nothing really in the city.
Limerick was bad. How are you open?
Limerick, well, no. Places out northeast of the city, Partine and Clonmara, were bad. Because that's where the
Shannon,
yeah. It's where everything, all of Lough comes down there, and then tries to flow through the city and backs up and meets tidal effects as well. And there's a couple of places in the city which do flood, but it didn't this time. St. Mary's Park, maybe.
Yeah.
So that wasn't too bad. But some of the stuff, like they posted, somebody put around a picture of Park Road in Mallow, and the water was almost up to the
What's that?
and the TV3 weather guy retweeted that as Mallow underwater.
But it's designed to be like
But
that.
it's Park Road, it always floods.
Yeah.
It's like
And they set up the flood defences, so
Yeah.
that way it flood, but
the rest of them won't. And if you're down there, Tesco and Lidl and all those other places are above it. So you can't get into them from Park Road, but they don't flood. But this was like, oh, look, more up to the buses. No, actually, not entirely. And I guess Middleton, the same parts of Middleton, were up to water up to like window height, but it was just down the distillery end. The distillery actually captured a lot of it in their overflow water holding pools. And the rest of the town wasn't so bad. So it's just like.
isn't it funny though, like the social media thing?
Yeah, it really,
the misinformation.
and then people, because other places are flooding, people, you know, you get 2 inches of water somewhere, and they post it as a picture of the terrible flood, because we want to be part of the emergency as well. And it's like, no, really, you know, there was one of the supermarkets somewhere, and it was a Superman or a Center, I can't remember, one of those that was predominantly decorated in red. And the door was a red sliding door, and it was like enormous floods at this, whatever, super value somewhere. But you could actually see clearly the bottom bar of the door was above the water. And it's like, no, you have puddle in the car park. But it is amazing, the whole, I'm sure there's a name for it. That whole bandwagoning thing.
But you know, if there's a purpose then, because like when you can't get information from official sources,
Well, yes.
say for example, like whether diversions are still in
Yeah.
place, you can get it from Twitter or Facebook.
Twitter or stuff, and some of the stuff, like Cork flood alerts, can be very.
Exactly, they were and that's all voluntary, that's
It
just
is.
people doing it.
But you really do need people, you know, if you're gonna post a picture of a flooded road, for God's sake, put the time on it. So that we know, this
Yeah.
picture was taken on Tuesday and now it's Friday, so
Yeah.
it's not evidence anymore, you know? Stuff like that, and that's a thing. But I was looking at something this morning, I have it on the iPad. Tactical Tech are tweeting a bunch of stuff, and some of the stuff I'll share later on is about images and verification in images, and images on social media and stuff like that. Let's all watch. How many bills?
CA and WC.
I was looking for.
Two girls.
Because
Anybody can get it first time straight.
you didn't even have a button.
It's not coming yet.
Wait, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, you can.
You know, with the portfolio for the literature, you say that we're able to do, it says 1-page visual. Can
Yeah,
that be a mind?
it could be, yes.
Okay.
It could be. One of the people in BA did a PowerPoint, and he worked it, somebody had never done it before, he, you know, on each, he had a succession of slides, and they worked in pairs. So the first slide of the pair was a set of quotes from the different readings, and then the next slide was his comment, bringing it together
Okay.
and explaining how they related to one another. Which is quite interesting way to do it, yeah.
Because yeah, I'm thinking of bringing in some of my PowerPoint for my presentation on the thesis.
Right.
For the knowledge.
Design for the,
Knowledge.
yeah.
Okay.
And obviously there, I mean, the PowerPoint was for the presentation, showing great that, but the planning and the ideas and how you structure it and the narrative of how you piece it together. Because then once you've written out that narrative, if you think about it, you know, where you do something as a PowerPoint that you explain why it's designed that way, then that can be handed off to a screenwriter for the movie. You know, because they would then see, this is the thinking behind that PowerPoint and how do we convert it into, or a radio script or something, you know, there's ways of that can work. So, what do we have today? Yes, we do not. We have, I just scheduled it. Everything's on Tuesday. I have to look at the schedule.
Sorry, you have another sauce that has like 11 to 2 3.
I think 11 to 2.
11 at least.
I think that's for the, that's our, it's an elective, it's not a compulsory one. Whatever's on tomorrow, that's from.
Just duration.
No, curation is the BA2, don't worry about that.
Oh, right.
Forget you ever heard about that.
So we're just here until 1 o'clock.
Yeah, we have a run, so, well, we won't, it's not 3 hours, don't worry. But it's to try and fit all of Sean's teaching is Tuesday. And to juggle things with the BA2 tools and methods as well, which
So he looked at, he had them last year, and he figured that they can operate at the same level as you lot. And that'll be interesting, they're an interesting bunch, there's some nice people, there's coaches, chancellors, and you won't say anything about it. In case it goes back, and that will require more chairs in the room.
Is the big group big?
920. Which means that the whole will be a nicely sized bunch, when it's up to 30 some, which is about the good comfortable size for full room. They all tend to sit in that booth there, they all tend to sit in the one booth.
All they need to do
So,
we're very culture based, like to speak to.
Marion is in your alley building, in a room on the third floor, but I can't remember the room
I think I
number.
have one.
Down the corridor of ancient classics.
Okay.
But I do not remember. I'm pretty sure it's the third floor.
Me too, yeah. Which one is it?
Maybe, yeah.
That I was kind of ping pong from the first, and then I was told that the person was important to didn't actually have responsibility for it, so I
Room 222.
Two.
Like,
Yes, two. There's one level above
Like,
ours.
I wouldn't be able to do that module if it's on the same time as the core module.
No. How was your Christmas?
Crazy.
Was it? Good. Crazy good or crazy bad?
It's crazy for my control.
Where is it?
That's the only reason. If there's that one, 6 hours in a way, 6
no, I've heard nothing about that.
Yeah, no, they're all at 6 to 8 today. And we're today?
You got no.
We got no information. Yeah, because I talked to one yesterday as well, and I think today. And then did they be on here and they have home again? Then they're back here again, or they'll be here again today.
I can't imagine people having.
Or it won't be very many people there. No, actually, I must message them about it, so that nobody knows that it's on. No,
Well, yeah, I don't think that you're not, like I said this on the, like today.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to do like, XML, GI,
Yeah, people are still doing it. So I'd say,
I think
tell them I could look.
I'll see if I'll go.
So nobody knew that one?
No.
No.
Nobody knew what?
The labs.
Or, oh, well, okay.
There's a big kind of gap there.
Yes. Well, you can have a discussion during the tools and methods when the other people show up, assuming that they get here. And if nobody is aware or up for going this evening, then we can just not have them when you pass on the message to Paul.
Yeah.
You know, you and him can go to Paul.
Yeah, because I don't think we got an email or anything, we just got the email from you about.
True,
the-
and I did not explicitly specify the lab, correct, right. Anyway, so I want to start off lightly, and welcome back, and we're all dry, and this is being recorded in 2 different ways. We'll see how that works with the technology. One is a Google Hangout on air, and Deirdre Bain has got the invitation, I hope, and may join in there, because she's teaching the online iteration of the course, and if not, she can watch the recording. And we're both starting in the same place, and we're roughly keeping sequence. And history and theory of digital art, well, I know very little about art, but I know what I like. And I usually start, well, I start with this. This is Paolo Veronese's Last Supper. And this almost does justice to the size of it. It doesn't quite. Has anybody been in the Louvre?
You do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have did you look at some of these?
Yeah.
Did you turn around and look at what was behind it?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've seen it,
Yeah.
right? So, well, okay, so anybody else seen it?
I've been in the Louvre and I've seen the Mona Lisa.
You didn't turn around and look at the wedding at Cannes. Is it the wedding? It is the wedding at Cannes, sorry, not the last one. So, this is great. It's always wonderful when somebody has seen the actual thing in situ. So, let me impose upon you and tell us, what does it look like?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a big question. I don't know if I can describe it.
Well, what do you remember about it?
Well, it was pretty crowded inside there, so I don't think I've ever really good look at it.
What about the lighting?
The lighting that was on it,
Yeah.
I don't remember anything.
Okay, and see, the thing about it is that in the Louvre, where it hangs, right, it was painted in Venice. It was a fresco thing in Venice. What happened was that during the Revolutionary Wars, when the French overran Venice and finally put an end to the Serene Republic, they looted stuff, and they looted this. So it was torn down and then rehung in Louvre. And therefore, if you actually look at it, you can see the tails where it was torn apart and then remounted, okay? And the reason it's interesting, is it art? It is art. I mean, there's no question but that it's art, right? Why is it art?
Because it's something that has been created.
Okay, yeah. There's no right answer. And don't worry if you're looking at it going, why is it art? Is it art because critics tell you this is art?
That's part.
That's part of it. Okay, there's other things. This is a question we're going to explore, right? In the first couple of weeks of the course. What is art and what is art in the digital age? And then in the middle block, we're going to look at specific fields, digital music, generative art, some areas like that. We're going to look at digital theater. And there's some readings of examples of how digital tools have impacted presentation in those. I might have a nice presentation on ELIT that I might add in. And then in the end, well, we'll keep that discussion going as long as we want to or can. The assessment. The assessment is two things. One is the collection of forum posts and discussions about art and various readings and subsets of it. And the other is you get to make art, right? And how this works is that, first of all, we will create a thread. It will be a forum discussion. So the thread is already there, in fact. Oh, no, not there. Come back to this. And you can see the sequence, art, music, assessment. Where have I got yes, there's this one, right? There's a thread here. And we can kick it off as early as you want to. And in that thread, what I ask people to do is post pictures or whatever of something that you've created before. Some piece of creative work which is done in the past. It doesn't matter what medium, it doesn't matter how ugly, right? It's kind of like a variation on the idea when in art class when the teacher brings in a bowl of fruit and asks you to draw it. But in this case, everybody's putting something in the bowl of fruit. Okay? And the idea is, when we did this, the first time we ran the NN, we only had 7 people in the class. So we were able to get everybody to bring something in physically and put it on the table and we looked at it. And then we went away and created something over the course of about 4 weeks. But because of the numbers, well, we could. But it's a bit burdensome particularly if your creative mode is cake decoration, as it was for one person in class, who brought in a cake. And that was nice and it was inspirational. So it's probably just as easy to stick with the hang the image on the thing. And the idea is, and in fact I'll open that thread. It should be accessible right now. People can start hanging things up there if they want to. The idea is we look at it and then we step back and from things that strike us in it, create something. The only requirement is that you must use some kind of digital tool at some point in the creative process, right? What I usually do, I'm trying to do something different this year, is I usually fall back on poetry. So last year I actually recorded a video, which I put back up there and share with you, where last year I went through all of the images that people had put up, and some people put up pictures of their crochet, because we had a couple of mad stitching people in class and things like that. And people put up pictures of, somebody last year took pictures, loved her cars, and took pictures of cars, her car in places, went on adventures with her car. And other people took pictures of stuff they'd seen around. And I went through and I looked at it, and what I did was, as I looked through them, I recorded my sort of first impressions in a mind map. And then I shuffled it around a bit until the words came together, and then I turned it into something that might loosely be described as poetry. On account of how I have won awards for poetry when I was a teenager, winsome teenager writing poetry, I can claim that I write poetry occasionally. So I produced something. Other people took some of the images and combined them, and that required them to use layers in Photoshop and do things they hadn't done before. Other people took some audio and remixed it. Some people took some video and some audio and remixed it together to make something that worked. One or two people took a PowerPoint presentation and just laid some music onto it, which was pretty minimal, okay? But the only sort of, I mean, the thing about it is I tend to grade it lightly because, but art, creativity, how can you possibly look at what somebody's produced and say, well, that's no good as a piece of art? It's not so much the aesthetic judgment as have you made an effort to use some kind of digital tool, ideally one that you haven't used much before, to explore how you can create something that is at least pretty, and maybe artistic, using the digital. The best example, in the first year we ran it, when we had that pile of things in the corner of the room, we had a screen printer and he photographed it from several different angles. And then he combined some of the photographs. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody seen screen printing, put the thing down and pull the ink across them. What he did was he created 7 different printing masks from the digital photographs, and then did a set of screen prints. So if you looked at it closely, you could see the things that people had brought in. I can clearly see the piece of poetry that I brought in as my contribution, and there's various other bits. There was a lot of English lit people, so there were various different things about Emily Dickinson and the Lighthouse there in the original collection, and you could pick them out, but he combined them, and he did it because he took the digital photographs and then turned the digital images into a physical product. Now, obviously, he lectured in photography, right, in Limerick, and was a screen printer, was his hobby for years. So he brought a particular set of skills to that, but what was interesting was that he had never really thought about combining the digital and the screen printing practice had been very traditional. So he had combined the two in a way that he hadn't done previously. And that was quite impressive. So, it's the other thing then, people have explored stuff like they've made GIFs, they've made animated GIFs, they've done stuff with, I'm just trying to think now. Somebody, Jess, Jess, PhD student, Jess created a fake art installation, where she took the images in her year, the images that everybody had brought in as their initial contribution, and she turned it into an exhibition catalog, an online exhibition catalog, which she found this thing on the web that generates randomly the sort of stuff that you read in art exhibition catalogs. So you had the little framed picture. It was like an exhibition catalogue mounted on the web, and you had the pretty, it was an old-fashioned sort of Baroque style framing around the picture of the thing, and then you had this really delightfully verbose and pretentious catalogue entry. And the whole point about it was that she was making the point, there was actually a point, that this was dead art. She was actually playing on the idea of dead art that I mentioned at some point in class, and saying, look, we brought in all these things of our previous creativity, and now here they are entombed in an exhibition with this pretentious text, which is actually just randomly generated. What does this say about it? It was a reflection on the way art gets buried in galleries and museums. You know, there was a logic to it. It was explicable. Yes, I could see what was happening there. So the thing about this is, of course, that it, I have no idea what people will do. And there's no necessity for it to be brilliant. We don't expect people to be up to the standard of Paolo Veronese. But it's have a go, right?
And you have to include every piece.
No, you don't. No, just the things that spark off, you know, that sort of fun thing. And I mean, it's not, the thing about it is, right, you know, you will look at something and what you see in it may be completely different to what somebody else will see in it. So, but there's a while yet before we have to worry too much about that. But that's what's ahead of me. I will drag up some of the previous year stuff, but I don't want to, I say I don't want people to be just sort of seeing what people did in previous years and following on with it. So we'll just see how it goes. At some point in time, not this year, but in the future, we may have rise to things like 3D printers and stuff, and we can have even more fun, and even more messy. Do not bake a cake. Okay, we would not have a cake. Try to keep it to something manageable. Somebody else who never finished his master's, he was going to do a painting. He had, what he did was he printed out the IP address, you know, the 4-digit 142.198.176.92 IP addresses that are behind all the internet addresses. So he got his search history, he converted it back to IP addresses, he printed them out, and he stuck it on a huge piece of canvas and painted some kind of an abstract picture over it. But he didn't glue the pieces of paper on very well. So there was a number of things about it. I think he grouped them together, and the coloration of the abstract was meant to reflect the type of sites he'd been visiting. So there was an awful lot of football in it, I remember. But the thing about it was that the actual physical canvas, because the pieces of paper weren't stuck on very well, every time he moved, he lost some pieces of paper. So his record of his search history of the snapshot was disappearing over time, but because he could photograph it, he could also have a sequence preserved digitally to show. So it went from a digital artifact into something that was abstract art in the physical world, which was going to gradually disintegrate, but he had a digital record of it at the various stages of its disintegration, which is very complicated, but obviously, again, he had an art degree before he came, an actual art degree before he came to the master's. So you can see that there was some kind of thinking about the nature and impermanence of art going on there. So I'm not particularly sure that I was in love with the painting, but the process was intriguing. And that kind of comes back to the nature of reality. What is real in terms of art? And the thing about Veronese is, and the reason I asked you about the lighting, is that the original is hung in a completely different setting to the original in inverted commas, to the setting that it was originally painted for in Venice. And in Venice, it was hung in a big, long, white room, barrel-shaped ceiling. It was the dining hall of a rich family's palazzo. So it was extremely well lit, with natural Venetian light, which is very different to the muggy old city light of Paris. And in Paris, it's hanging back to back with the Mona Lisa. So everybody looks at the Mona Lisa, and occasionally somebody turns around and looks at the Veronese. And obviously, you're seeing it, the first thing is, you're seeing it under a completely different set of lights and in a completely different setting, because in Venice, it was up. It was above the dining table. So, you know, it would be up there and the family's dining table was under it, and you can see the whole thing was created that it fitted precisely in the scene. And then the French came and stole it and tore it up and hung it in a dusty old corridor beside something that everybody, I think this is a much better piece of art. There's all sorts of other things about it that we can come back to and talk about next week in terms of, well, I mean, it's not the wedding at Cana, as if there was a photograph of the wedding at Cana, because obviously it's a painting of the wedding at Cana located in a Venetian scene, and all the people are wearing Venetian Renaissance dress, and there's parts of Renaissance Venice in the background. So it's an interpretation which is obviously commissioned by someone in Venice to fit them. So that's one layer of stuff that the artist has taken the original concept of the wedding at Cana and translated it to somewhere else. And then of course the French stole it. There's a wrinkle. There's a wrinkle in this story. And it's in the first readings. Now, there's two things that I'd like people to do for next week in terms of discussion and reading to start us off. We'll get into discussion more. One is in the discussion, what I've asked people to do, I haven't asked people to post about it, like, is to bring out some things and make your list of things that you think, steal some art, and curate. You know, if you have a list of 5 things, desert island art, that you can say from the end of the world, what are the 5 things that you would put on your list, right? I respect to the week that's in it, but that's not all. Let's take it that one that everybody's 6th choice is a David Bowie album, okay? Take that as read this week, but anything else? Or you could think of it as a desert island discs, or that you've been given an unlimited budget to put on events for the City of Culture, or something like that. What would you include in your list and why? The only limitation is you have to choose 5 things. You can't choose a 6th except for the, as I say, Bowie album. So that's one thing. And what I'm doing there is I'm trying to get people looking at, you know, what constitutes art. How far do you want to draw? What do we think is art? And the other thing to read, right, in the folder, no, I didn't ask people to discuss it. We'll discuss it in class next week. It's fine, it's fine. There's 2 things. There's a reading by Bruno Latour about what is real in digital art anyway. Right, but I put that one second. Those are both chapters from a book about art and digital and computer code, but I put the appendix to the chapter first, right? I want you to read the appendix to the chapter first, because the appendix describes how the Veronese is copied. If you go to Venice, you can see the original, air quotes, because a company scanned the original in the Louvre, and then they developed a 3D printer which would print a precise copy right down to brush strokes and texture depths. right? And they designed the printer so that it would do egg fresco paint, not ink. So they recreated the original medium, they recreated every brush stroke, they even recreated the tears and the stitching where it was stitched back together. Okay? So if you did not know, there's a place in Venice, it's the original location, the original lighting, you can go back in there and you can see as if the Veronese was taken from Paris back to Venice and put in its original location. And the question, so the appendix describes something, it's fascinating. The level of effort and technical stuff. And then the article, the discussion, raises the question, well, which is the real Veronese? His intent was for it to be displayed in a very particular location, in a very particular set of conditions, in a room that was used in a particular way, with particular lighting especially, and that's where it was really intended to be. And the original, that's now hanging in a Grotty museum in Paris, in no way reflects the artist's original intent at all. He'd probably be appalled at what they've done to him. He would be, I imagine, if he cared. So it raises the question, and then we'll go on, subsequent, one of the big readings we'll go on to after that is Walter Benjamin's essay about art in an age of mechanical reproduction. What happens when you can make copies endlessly? What then happens? How important is the original? When I asked you what is art, somebody said creative. Who said it was creative? Was it creative? Somebody mentioned creation, creativity.
I said, yeah, anything that's creative.
Yeah. And there is this thing that the original artist, you know, puts original inspiration and creativity and skill and technique into it. And yet, in fact, the Bruno Latour article, I think if I remember the opening sentence correctly, talks about something that we'll all be familiar with. Yes, Holbein's ambassadors in the National Gallery in Dublin. And the point is, of course, that people are so used to looking at the poster or reproductions of Holbein's ambassadors that when they're confronted by the original, the actual physical painting, it doesn't look right. Everybody knows Holbein's ambassadors. Just for the hell of it. Let's find it. The thing about this is, right, the thing about this image is, of course, that it is one of the most reproduced pieces of art in the world. It's one of the list of, you know, and lots of people have copies of it. And if you were, you know, if you were a student, when you were a student, you either had Jim Fitzpatrick's Che Guevara poster, or a music poster, or if you were being pretentious and arty, you had Holbein's ambassadors because you were slightly more and you did Latin. Sorry if I'm offending anyone. Holbein's ambassadors, you know, they're wall now. So when for you, the context was in your house, in your room. And that was your original interaction with it and your relationship. And this is the question, what is the relationship between artist and art and viewer? The ambassadors wouldn't have been my first choice to make at this point, but the point that the tour kicks off with is that everybody has either seen it in a book or had a poster or sent someone a postcard because, hey, I've been to the National Gallery in London and here's a pretty postcard for you. And that's a very different experience from seeing the actual painting, and also, of course, at the time it was painted. I better shut up now because I'm giving far too much away, but at the time it was painted, the only way you could see it was in Hampton Court Palace. And therefore you had to be a person of sufficient importance to gain access to the location. And it was hung there as a symbol of the power and wealth, etc., of Henry VIII, who commissioned it in Maidenhead. Whereas now, you know, any pretentious git talking about art can throw it up on an overhead projector and talk about it to you and discuss the symbolism of it and all that sort of stuff. which is very complex and it's a deeply allegorical painting. So the Latour piece opens this question: what is real, and how important is that personal thing? And it then leads on to Benjamin subsequently about art in the age of mechanical reproduction, and Baudrillard about simulacra, which are kind of the big philosophical discussions. There's also a reading from Martin Heidegger about art, but that's generally, I leave it there, but I won't expect people to read it, but that's a couple of weeks away, because people generally get as far as one thing at Benjamin and Baudrillard. Martin Heidegger is kind of, yeah, no, that's too hard. People don't get into that. But it discusses this nature of what is art. And it kind of links in then with asking you to come up with your list of 5 things that you consider to be art now. And again, there's no right answer to that list. So what essentially I'm trying to do is look at the broad definitional questions of what is art, what is real, what is the function of art? Is there some way in which the function of art defines, how is it defined? Is it defined by who created it? Is it defined by where it is? Is it defined by originality? Is it defined by this concept of aura? How do these things work for us? So we're working from the assumption that we know nothing about art, which is not entirely true. People have various different knowledge about it. And we're trying to come up with sort of some kind of outline of what we think art is roughly, and then we plow into looking at, well, how does the digital change this? And it's fun. And there's scope for argument and discussion about it, so I'm going to shut up now. Anybody any questions?
I suppose a lot of people tend, your initial thing is think art painting.
Yes.
Galleries and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's way wider than that.
Yeah, it can
Vocal
be.
performances.
Yeah.
Physical performances.
You'll note that I will put up the Dean Radar clip about Curlew, which is a piece of e-literature, which her background, and we'll repeat this when we look at it, is in Greek, classical Greek, and she studied Greek theatre. And there's a very specific repertoire of gestures and movements in Greek drama. I didn't know this. But in Curlew, what she does is she uses those with a connect. And it's not just poetry, it's also visual and it's literature, and it's designed to work on 3 screens as a presentation about something, which it has an interesting story in itself. It's about an island and erosion and stuff like that, and people's lives on small islands off the coast of Louisiana. But she combines that with the repertoire of classic Greek theatrical gesture and the connect. And there's no doubt that it's a piece of art. And it's a very, very, deeply complicated and very smart piece of art. And it ain't a painting, but it does involve images. So,
Tracy Eman and all that Damien Hirst.
if you have handed 2.2 million, the bed is on for sale. Tracy Eman's unmade bed.
I thought around the time that the Japanese tourists came in and messed it all up.
Yes.
Which created all kinds of...
Which causes all sorts of problems.
Yeah, because they had to rearrange it. Did they rearrange it the same way that she had?
And you see, and one of the things that I have is this whole question of interactivity as well. Because the other thing that fundamentally the digital changes is, and funnily enough, in a couple of weeks' time, there's a bunch of readings there about interaction and how the digital allows you to interact with a piece of art. Whereas previously it was something that you hung on the wall and you weren't allowed to touch, you weren't even allowed to get close to. But it is an awesome experience to, now, Sean Keating's Men of the West. Sean Keating's Men of the West is particularly interesting for me because okay, hold on. Maybe it's Men of the South. Yeah.
I have it up in my fishing outlet right now.
Well, the thing about it is that it's on the Crawford collection, but when I saw it in the City Gallery in Limerick. It's an enormous painting. But the way it was hung and the way it was done, it was hanging on the wall there, and there was a rope about there, so you could actually stand here and see every brush stroke. For something that is probably one of the most reproduced pictures in Irish history textbooks, but it's reduced to a squinchy little picture in the chapter on the War of Independence. But when you actually turn a corner, and it's huge, and you can literally get your nose 2 inches from it, it's a completely different, again, there is this moment of stuff in terms of how you interact with it, and, so, I don't know. So there's all sorts of other things, and there's no right answers, and I don't want to sort of confine people too much about it. Just think about it and see, and what you want. You're going to bring all sorts of interesting things, because you're going to bring a completely different set of art to us. Fantastic, I love this. You see, every year the class is different, and different stuff comes in. Yes. Oh, you could make something wonderful. I don't think it's talented now, but this could be very interesting indeed. Okay, so we'll just let it at that. So come up with your list of things and hang them on the thing, and have a read of the 2 Bruno Latour pieces and think about this whole question of originality, and we'll have a discussion about that next week. We just build up the discussion and think about creativity. And Deirdre Bain is mostly taking charge of the online version of the course, but she has a lot of research interest in creativity, and she's dug up some stuff, and she's digging up stuff on creativity in the digital, and we may fold some of that in later on to try and sort of have it more. Because one of the things about the digital humanities stuff is that this allows you to be wonderfully creative, and you can paint. David Hockney now uses an iPad for painting. So this is the other thing as we get sort of out into March, is we can start thinking, well, okay, how does the digital actually open the pathways to creativity for people in ways that were not previously accessible. But I don't want to preempt that. So we leave it at that. And I'll shut down all these various different recordings now.